over 10 years ago, I was sitting at a car wash minding my own business, waiting for my car to go through. I was watching the suds change colors, thinking how awesome it is that we have this technology, when all of a sudden this guy walked in front of me and totally caught my attention because he didn't have any arms and his legs were just really short and his feet were twisted upside down. He was walking on the top of his feet. I followed him with my eyes, which I probably shouldn't have. Everybody else was minding their own business, but I was following him, and he walked out and it looked like he was getting ready to get in a car, and there was nobody else in that car. And if he was getting ready to drive that car, I wanted to know how. So I ran up to him, and he says I kept him from closing his door. But I jumped and I said, "Hey, are you getting ready to drive that car?" And he says, "Yeah." I said, "Would you mind showing me how?" And you've heard me tell this, but he says, "Yeah." He said, "I designed this little thing where, I push it that way and it accelerates, push it this way, it brakes, and with this foot I steer." And the next logical question is, do you have a driver's license? So I asked him, "Do you have a driver's license?" He says, "Yeah, I got a driver's license. Passed my test on the first try." I said, "Man," and at that point I said, "What is your name?" He said, "Gabriel." And I thought, okay, this is a test. This is God testing me. This is an angel. And God's just seeing how I'm going to respond. So I literally reached out and touched him. And it's just, and he kind of looked at me weird. And I said, "Okay, you're for real. So maybe you're not an angel." And just so impressed me. I said, "I got to know more about your story." He reached into the pocket on the side of his car door and pulled out a wallet with his feet, opened it up with his feet, and handed me a business card that had his website on it. We parted ways then. I went back and I looked up his website, found out this guy must be a Christian just from the tone of his website. I called him up and said, "I got to know more about you." And so we met, we talked, and that started a friendship. I invited him to come to speak to our church then, which I didn't realize. He was praying that God would open up doors for him to get into churches and start speaking, because it was right at that point that God was putting a dream inside of him about taking this message literally all across the globe. And I didn't know all that. I just said, "You got to come tell my church your story, man. Would you come and be my guest?" He said, "Sure." That was the first church he ever spoke in. And now he's gone literally all across the nation and in many other parts of the world sharing this story. And I got to show you a short little video clip just before I introduce our guest to you today, so you can just see a little bit more of some of the things that he has accomplished. And I've told people every time I'm around him, I'm inspired, I'm encouraged, and I'm ashamed. The things that I let stop me and keep me from doing. But man, you're in for a treat today. And I hope you're inspired, encouraged, and ashamed. But hey, watch this video clip just before I introduce Gabriel to you today. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to welcome Gabriel Najera.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a great honor and privilege to be here, especially standing here with your pastor, whom I've known now for about almost 12 years now. And you've got an excellent pastor, let me tell you. And I'm really honored and grateful that you took the time to come out. I just flew in yesterday from Mexico City, where I'm doing some conferences down there. I've been doing these motivational seminars all over the world, and I'm flying back right after this service today to go back to Mexico and finish what I've got going on over there. But it's so much joy and a privilege to be able to watch people as I share my story, as I share everything that I've done in life, to be able to show people that God can do anything. There's no limits that God puts on us whatsoever. We put our own limits on ourselves. Can I tell you just a little bit about me? I was originally born in Mexico City, back in 1966. So that's 45 years for all the people who want to do the math real quick. And unfortunately, being born in Mexico City in a third world country back in the 60s, there wasn't a whole lot of hope for me. Back in the 60s, handicapped people were just kind of, shall we say, in the way. So they tried to put them out of the way as much as possible. As a matter of fact, the day I was born, the doctor's first thing they told my parents was, "He's dead. He's dead." Imagine what that felt like after 9 months of me giving them all the trouble that I gave my mom for 9 months. And then I realized that she wasn't going to get to enjoy it any more than that. But then they realized I wasn't dead after I gave the first yell of glory there and said, "Hey, I'm here." The sigh of relief that my mom probably felt right afterwards. But then the doctors carried on with their mentality and said, "Well, yeah, he's breathing, but don't expect much more out of him. He's probably not even going to live past today or tomorrow, so just take him home and enjoy the little time that you're probably going to have with him. A day, a week, a month, a year. Who knows?" My mom, in her infinite wisdom, then just took me in her arms and said, "Let it be God's will." Let it be God's will, was her words. From then on, as I was growing up, they were constantly trying to find ways of integrating me into society, integrating me into trying to fit in with the rest of the crowd, to fit in with kids, to find a way to educate me, and try to have a way for me to have a life. They tried to, when I was in about 4 years old, try to put me into a daycare, a pre-K type school, so that maybe I could try to learn something, because they figured out that I did have something between my ears besides wax. And so they put me in a pre-K, and my mom dropped me off in the morning, and then came back to pick me up that afternoon, just to find that all they did with me was put me in a corner with a box of Crayolas and said, "That's it. That's life." My mom quickly asked the teacher, "Why do you have him there in the corner? Why isn't he playing with the other kids?" And the teacher just said, "Well, don't expect much. That's it. That's going to be his life." But my mom said, "No. That's not all he's going to have out of life." And quickly just picked me up off the floor and carried me home. And from then on, they dedicated the rest of the years to try to find ways for me to be able to get an education. Luckily and blessed by God that they found two options for me to be able to get an education. One of them was a school in Port Arthur, Texas, which is just 100 miles outside of Houston. And another school was in Canada. Well, it didn't take them long to decide which one they were going to choose. Texas or Canada. Well, Texas was only 2 hours away, and Canada was, 5 hours away by plane. So they quickly chose the school in Port Arthur, and that's where I grew up. I grew up in Port Arthur from the time I was 8 years old till I was till I was 16 when I graduated from high school. After graduating from high school, I moved on to Lamar University in Beaumont, where I studied computer science and became a computer engineer. So I did have a life after all. Thank you. So from then on began my challenge of trying to take on the world, trying to take on the mentality, the attitude of people about handicapped people. Here in the United States, we're blessed that we have more opportunities. We're blessed with the fact that we know that we're all God's creatures. We're not just a body. And so it was that from then on, I tried to look for work, and unfortunately, nobody would give me a chance. The excuse they would use was just be, well, you don't have any experience, so, we can't hire you. But come on. I could tell by the look in their face. It wasn't because of the experience. I mean, it was really because they didn't think that I could do the work. And so I went on like that for about 2 or 3 years, trying to look for work and kept knocking on doors. Meantime, I was surviving with little jobs like telemarketing and stuff like that. But it wasn't really what I was meant to do. I was meant to be with computers. So finally I decided, okay, you're not going to hire me, so I won't go to work for a company. I'll start my own company. And that's what I did. I started a business, which was in the computer business, and quickly began to let it grow by going back to the companies that wouldn't hire me and telling them that my company could do the work that they needed. Now, they didn't know it was me. They knew it was a company. So because they knew it was a company, they let us do the work, and then I would just show up a couple of months later and pick up the check. And just say, thank you very much. No regrets. Amen. But that was the solution that I had to find to be able to overcome the mentality of me not given the chance to do the work. And since then, in the last 28 years, I've built 8 different companies. I've sold 6 of them, and one of them I just closed down because I didn't have time to keep it going. And then I've just kept one business, which has been my computer business, setting up networks and taking care of companies with their computers. And that's basically what I've been doing for the last 28 years. Now, for the last 10 years, I realized 10 years ago that my presence around people has an impact without me even knowing it. And I could stand here and tell you hundreds of stories. I've told Pastor, I think I bored him since yesterday with 3 or 4 or 5 of them, about how people are blessed by just watching me and seeing me. One such incident that I'll tell you quickly, there was a lady that I went to the Office Depot. By the way, I live in Houston now, and that's where I run my business down there. But about 10 years ago or so, I stopped at an Office Depot to buy some office supplies, and I wasn't thinking about anything except I just wanted to go in, grab the stuff, get out, go back to my office, and work on the project that I was working on. Kind of the same similar story I had with Pastor at the car wash. And then I walked in and walked it back out, and as I was walking back out, all of a sudden this lady grabs my door to my car and says, "Thank you." I'm like, "Thank you for what?" And I didn't do anything. I just went in, grabbed my stuff, and came back out. She's like, "No, thank you, really." She says, "You just don't know what you've done." She says, "My son and I are sitting in the car behind you, 1 row behind you, in the parking lot. And my son has been very depressed and very sad about the fact that he's 18 years old, can't find a job, can't go to work, or hasn't gone to work, and basically he just feels like he's not worth anything." She says, "And we've been sitting there in the car arguing for the last 2 hours. But the minute you drove up in your car and got out of your car, he stopped. He stopped complaining. He stopped whining and didn't say nothing more until you walked back out. When you walked back out," he said, "Mom, why am I complaining? Look at him. Look at the car he's driving." Unfortunately, I always have to drive sports cars because I have to drive a 2-door car. I can't drive a 4-door car because I can't get in it. So she said, "Look at the car he's driving. And look, he just moves around and carrying a bag like nothing, said, why am I? She was in tears when she was telling me this. She was in tears saying, you just don't know what a difference you've made. And then she called him over, and he came over also in tears and said, you know, he said, you've changed my life. And I asked him, I said, do you know it wasn't me? Amen. It was God, not me. They went back to their car and never heard from them again. But over and over and over, it happens to me that God's presence is always there. He's always there every second, every minute, everywhere I go. And that's what has led me to, in the last 10 years, start doing these motivational seminars and going to churches and giving my testimony. Because if I can change one life, one day, I know that the world can be a better place to live in. One quick question for you. Do you have hands? Raise your hands if you have one. Wow, that's a lot of hands. Do you know why you have hands? Do you know why you have hands? I ask that question because I get the opposite asked all the time, especially the little kids that come up, why don't you have hands? And I haven't found the answer yet. I mean, yeah, I could say because God didn't give me any, but that's not an answer to satisfy a little kid, you know. So I ask you, why do you have hands? Look at your hands for a minute. Take a second to look at them. How often do you look at them? How often do you realize what you've got? When you look at your hands right now, do you see everything that you've done with them? Do you see what you did with them today as you bathed yourself this morning and got dressed and got ready to come here? Do you see that those are what you use to feed your body with? Do you see that that's what you use to build your home with, to take care of your family with? Do you see what God has given you? And what do you do with them? Do you use them to strike a person with? Or do you use them to caress a person with? Do you hug a person? Have you hugged your mother lately? Have you hugged your father lately? Have you hugged your children, your grandkids? Do you know why you have hands? Do you know why God gave Christ hands and what he did with Christ's hands? Do you know that he nailed his hands to a cross? Why? For you? For me? And they didn't just tie his hands to the cross. They could have just used ropes. No, they used nails. Nails that were going to hurt him. They used nails to make sure he wasn't just going to get down from the cross that easily. Not without a lot of pain. And do you see your hands? And now do you know why you have hands? You're blessed. And so am I. Amen. Because from the beginning, the first words I heard from my mother was, let it be God's will. And it's been his will for me to accomplish everything that I've accomplished in my life. It's been his will for me to be standing right here, right now, to tell you that if you allow God's will to take your life, to take control of your life, you can accomplish many more things than what I've done with my life. The difference between you and I, and me being successful, and you being successful, is whether or not you take your will or you take God's will. That is the difference. It's not my will. I'm just an instrument. I'm here because God wants me to be here. And I've been everywhere that I've gone where God has opened doors for me left and right, without anybody having to judge me anymore as to whether or not I can do it or not. I lived all my life proving to people and showing people I can do it. Just give me a chance, let me show you, and I can do it. Until 10 years ago, when, I don't know why, but it just finally dawned on me, sank into me, that I don't have to prove to people anything. And now I've dedicated my conferences and all the motivational seminars that I do to saying, if I can do it, you can do it. There's no reason why you can't do it. Not whatsoever. You've got two good hands. You've got two good feet. Just let it be God's will. God bless you.
Thank you.
Well, if you can do it, I can do it. So I'm going to iron my clothes tomorrow. Never done it before, but I'm going to.
Thank you.
Gabriel.
I do have a problem with when I show that video at the schools, when I go to schools, and the parents walk out of the schools telling their kids, you see, I told you you should be able to wash your own clothes.
Go ahead, you can be seated. Thank
you.
you, Gabriel. Thank you very much. Hey.